Man, I love sitting down for the DPL auction every single year. It's just a super nice time for the whole community. And, this year shouldn't be any different. I don't think I'm going to get nommed for quite a while though, and hopefully I'm in for something new, because I'm getting a bit sick of getting drafted by Trick of Eye. Well, I guess neither of those things came true. But, is what it is. How's it going, guys? And welcome to DPL Season 10. And it's going to be something that I put quite a bit of content together for, because I have no other ideas. DPL is one of the most fun times in the community, because it is a Tier 1 team tour, and it's less PC than Smogon, so people have a bit more fun, shall we say. Yes, I have done some other content already, in the form of a bit of a disastrous stream where I put together a mock auction prediction, which went surprisingly well, in terms of how the auction went. But today, I'm not going to focus on the auction. I'm going to focus on the drafts. Because we know by now, I'm the guy that likes to look at trends and seeing how patterns are developing and things like that. So, let's do that for 16 drafts. Now, there's one thing that is true, is that while yes, drafting week 1 necessarily win you the tour, good God, it can lose you the tour. It's probably the most stressful week outright, and it also makes your sleep schedule absolutely terrible. Because, as a European, I've had some pretty bad experiences, where I go to sleep and I wake up to some horrible things. Whether that be the fire resistant on draft being a Clawitzer, or there's a random Garganackle. Thanks, Hunter. I appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get talking about these 16 drafts, and let's see what we can delve out of this information. Champions was always going to be an interesting one, because there's no set precedence, so it's not a thing if we can compare it to previous events. This is the first time. So it is just going to be, how does everyone have their early game metagame impressions? And that's always interesting to look at. But there was some things that we could kind of extrapolate from this. That pick order was fairly predictable, and you'll see that across all of these drafts. The interesting ones to me, I'm not going to comment on. I like the team, I helped make the team, but we're going to move on from there. Huge Powers is interesting because, Mega Greninja I think is very good, and there is some cool aspects because you have webs, Rotom is fairly alright, and Clef Glamora Excadrill. But the funny thing is, I think one of that Cleffer Glamora would rather be Mega. Or maybe that's just me. I'm not 100% certain you needed the Mega Gren. But that's hardly... There's no idea how we can really judge that since we're so early into the metagame. But I think pick 2 Pulp makes sense. Pick 3 Garchomp makes a ton of sense. Some really cool picks here. You see the Kingambit Hawlucha, which I think is really nice in this meta. And getting a Mega Delphox round 3 seems really good. Especially when you will see a round 1 Mega Delphox later. Skullvillain's team is cool. Mega Garchomp's a nice pick because the grounds are awful in this tier. Bellybolt's good because the grounds are awful in this tier. And getting a Weavile this late really just rounds the team out nicely, even if your removal is Defox Scizor and Rabbit's this from Rita. Judgment Day, I do like the team. I thought after Aegislash Galar Slowking that we were going to be seeing a Mega Crabominable angle. We did not. Mega Meganium is still very cool. I think it could do relatively well. And you will notice they have quite a passion for Jolteon. Not convinced on the Noivern pick though, I'm not going to lie. But I think those first 7 are fantastic ones. We'll see on the Noivern. I'm with Darker on that one, I don't think it's that good. Slay the Spiker, you see Mega Lop with a good Spiker. And then you see Dragonite Hatterene for the removal stuff, Sinistcha for spin blocking, Tinkaton and Stunfisk for more rocks, and then Garbodor. So that team seems like it should be fine. Mega Lop is going to be very good, obviously. So we'll kind of see how that pans out. Draft Dodgers, we see an interesting team. I didn't think we'd see much 9-point Volcarona usage, but here we are. Especially paired with a Starmie, which is probably one of the better Rapid Spinners. I was surprised Starmie was going this late. I thought it would go a little bit earlier. But that first 4 was really nice, and then Sylveon's good because, it has Mystical Fire back. But I'm not convinced on that bottom 3. And finally, with Big Dogs, Mangalade. It's just a cool Mangalade team. It looks quite old school, which is really funny, because there's nothing new here. But there is some very cool aspects. You obviously have the spikes in the ground with the spin blocking Gengar. You have Slowbro as kind of a general pivot. This might be the worst of the bunch of them. It's really hard to know because I think there's some very old school 2015, 2016 draft elements here that I don't like. But there is a chance that it very much works because we don't know what Champions is at this point. Honestly, a bunch of fairly interesting teams, and obviously there's not a lot of information to gain from this, but there is definitely some patterns which you'll notice as we go through the rest of these drafts. those round ones look very similar as we move on to Champions 2, and the teams have some fairly similar ideas. I really like this latest Spikers team. I think Mega Dragonite is super slept on. The only thing that I kind of have against this is the removal is Conkeldurr and Cleavor. And while yes, you do have some great pivots, I'm just not sure that like not even having a real chance of keeping that Dragonite multi-scale is going to work out. Draft Dodgers, that first 3 looks insane. And the Dragonite, which is an interesting try of just like go Dragon Spam and pressure the hell out of fairies with those first 4, and then even Polion, which I think is super good. I think it's one of the best deals of dealing with Mega Floette. I think it has a bunch of versatile options that it can use in this metagame. And then we see Serena again because you can tell removal's dire. Talonflame I think is interesting, solves the speed gaps with this team too. So I want to see how that team does. Big Dogs, once again a round 4 Weavile, which I didn't expect. And I think compared to the Mega Floette team in Champions 1, I don't think it's as good. But I think Blastoise, Skarmory, Garchomp, Weavile as a first 4 should be able to get some sorts of results. Triggervi team, I won't talk about too much because that's my own team and I don't want to leak stuff. Huge power, Mega Garchomp, Escadrille, it's sand, and then decided let's chuck on rain and snow elements. I'm really confused about this team. It looks like Zazo made it while he was high, which is like always because Zazo's juiced. So I'm really intrigued. I think that first 6 is the most common 6 to show up. It could definitely just overwhelm a lot of teams. And like I've said, Mega Garchomp I do think is a mon that needs to get drafted in this because of lack of good grounds. So I'm interested to see how it does. Also, do like Hatterene for this team, just to give a magic bounce and to kind of take the pressure a little bit off of Escadrille. Nature's Guardian does look like an Aura's team, just with a Sinistra. So I think that team should do fairly alright. We know Scizor is good, Megalop is great obviously, and Hydreigon has a bunch of options. And once again, surprised the Starmie's going that late. I thought it'd be earlier. Especially when you look at Spikers, if the plan was Dragonite, I would have thought Starmie would be the play. But hey, that's just me. Skullvillains, speaking of looking like an Aura's team, except there's a rain element on the end of this too, which I find really funny. With Politoed plus Archaludon, Arch I think is going to be very good, especially as a secondary steal, because Scizor can deal with the scary fairies for the most part, especially with rain up. And you do have Gren, Crook, and Hawlucha. Sylveon, like I said, is good. And then the Garbodor again, which is just hazards on grounded poison, so it makes sense. Interesting team, does look very L5 build, and we'll see how it does. And finally we have Judgment Day, which another Galar Slowking from them. We see a Corviknight, which just shows that it's kind of, that's where it goes. Mega Delphox, which once again, getting that round 3 is really good. Prim, Mamo, Como, Jolteon, Mousehold. Jolteon Love is there again. Mamoswine makes sense for Chilly Reception. Really like this team. And Mousehold I do think, yes, it kind of does lose to stuff like Ghosts, which it doesn't do great against. But the Steel types, I think this Judgment Day team does very well against. So I kind of like the Mousehold idea. Overall, I think these drafts, there was a bit more cooking going on compared to Champions 1, looked a little bit safer. And there's a lot of these that I'm kind of just curious how it does. And if some of these get blown up at mids, I won't be surprised. I know I said Champions 2 was a major case of cooking. I think Champions 3 might be the safest one across the board. We see that Nature's Guardians team, which is basically what I was expecting with the Mega Dragonite, to kind of put the Starmie there. It looked like they learned from the mistakes of the other Mega Dragonite team that we just saw. So this one is quite interesting. The Pex plus Diggersby is an interesting wheel. Conk is still great, and Florges just kind of give this team the Fairy type. Honestly, it looks like a really nice team. I think we'll do well. Skullvillains, you know, you have to have the obligatory looks like an Aura's team. Getting Blastoise that late is huge, because that thing is quite scary with no Mirror Herb. Even if it kind of looks like he might be clicking Rapid Spin more in his team. And I still hate Noivern. Why? I get the necessity of like, oh, Noivern gives me the extra speed, but why? Judgment Day, this is what I was expecting. Dragapult plus Mega Glamora, I think is really, really good, because getting Mega Glamora in on any of the fairies is really, really scary. And I think some of the tools around it weren't quite what I was expecting. Rotomosh, Crocodile, Clacky is fine, and Hawlucha. Snorlax I get because you do kind of need a fatter pivot, but it also kind of slows down the team's momentum in general. And Hisuian Decidueye just kind of seemed like, oh, it's a one-pointer and we need a bit more removal. So I'm not convinced on that, but I don't even think you need the more removal, because you already have Defog Lucha, and you've Mortal Spin Mega Glamora with the attack boost and adaptability, so I think the strongest removal gets in this game in terms of power. So, I don't really know. Slay the Spiker, we have another Aegis / Galish Slowking team, but there's also some interesting elements. I prefer this Volcarona team to the other Volcarona team we saw, even if it does kind of only have Quack Evolve for removal. Because Mega Clefable is here for Magic Bounce, and I'm interested to see how well Mega Clefable does into the Hazard Setters, because I think a lot of them probably still beat it, but we'll see how that goes for Spikers. Interesting team, and Double Grasses at the end is certainly a choice, even if I'd say Torterra is solely there because they got sniped under the ground type. Draft Dodgers, yeah, looks like a team we've kind of seen before. Toxicroak is cool at 2 points, and I do think Hisuian Arcanine could be nice. But that front four, that's also the latest we saw Greninja go. So that top 5 I think looks really strong. And then it did just kind of look like, oh shit, we need to get a ground type on this, and the ending might be a little bit clunky, but honestly, I think the team is pretty okay. Big dogs, we have another Palafin Sneasler Hydreigon. Mega Skarmory, I think he's really cool and could do super well into some of these drafts. So I'm interested to see how that does, especially with the way that it's paired, because you have Palafin for the fire types. Belly Bolt is just a fat electric to be able to deal with stuff. Mamoswine's a great ground type for this team. We see the obligatory Serena again because removal trouble. Sylveon, which you need a fairy type for this team. Makes sense because you kind of want to take the dragon pressure away from Mega Skarm so it can do offensive things. So I really like this Big Dogs team. I'm super interested to see how it does. Then you have us, which, you know, kind of has some similarities to Champions 2 Judgment Day. I hope those two teams don't play. And finally, we get to Huge Power, which just another huge power cook. There's, you know, you've Hisuian Samurott for Spikes, you've Mega Scizor, it's another rain team. So another weather team from this. And I think this one's a lot better because you have Arch and you have Basket Legion. So you have the Swift Swimmer as well as having the secondary steel thing again, which I like a lot. So it kind of took elements from that Scovillain's team. And Escadrille just to tie it all together for removal. Seems pretty okay. Not sure Dragonite's correct, or Slurpuff is. Would have loved to have seen a Beartic, because what do you have for a well-played Beartic? I don't know. But yeah, I like these teams a lot more across the board. Did see some interesting Mega Trials here, such as the Mega Skarmory, Mega Glamora as well, and Mega Clefable, which is cool, because obviously other were the Mega in this pool, with the exception of, I believe, Mega Gallade. Mega Dragonite only went twice. But Scizor went in every single pool, Lopunny went in every single pool, Delphox went in every single pool. Which, I thought maybe there'd be more than 3, but if there is only to be 3, that makes a lot of sense. So, that's the Champions Drafts. We'll see how they go as time goes on. And maybe we'll need to touch up on these at mids when people start panicking and doing some crazy shit, because that's what happens when it's new gens. And now we get to SV, where things will probably be a bit more predictable. And that's fairly safe. You see, Pick 1 Meowscarada was the common trend across every single one, which is pretty cool across these 7 drafts. Well, cool, probably boring, but across the 7 drafts it was the same Ranglamon in every single one. And you do see the trend that very much was apparent. Meowscarada into Torn, then Valiant, then Terapagos, then some form of Darkrai, Great Tusk, Zarude, and then Raging Bolt in the Wheel was pretty damn common. So, Big Dog's team looks fairly standard. Terrai Drapple's cool on that. Lando, because you need a ground type on it, and Corv for defog makes sense. And it's nice to see a Meowscarada team not with Terra Keldeo, not looking at any other teams in particular. Ogerpon makes a lot of sense for this team, and Mismag's great, and Duraludon is an interesting try for 2 points, which we've seen it do work before, so I can see it. Skip over our team, we'll just say the Decidueye's awesome. Then you get to this huge power team that's a Terra Tinkaton, which I'm intrigued by. Huge Power, the one thing I noticed with their SV is that they didn't really have an SV main, so the drafts definitely looked interesting, to say the least. They didn't really follow any sort of norms in quotations. So you see this Iron Valiant, Deoxys Speed, Gliscor, Tinkaton, Mandibuzz, then chucked on a Palafin, and then it was like, ooh, Terra Brambleghast. Then a Grafaiai, which I haven't seen in eons. So it's a team I'm really interested to see how it functions and how it does, because on paper it just looks like a bunch of clunky pieces. Nature's Guardian's team was pretty good. Terra Cresselia is obviously great. Weezing Galar is among us getting Resurgence back at the minute because people are wanting fairies more and the defog is nice. And Cobalion we're getting seen for the first time in 2 DPL seasons. But Terrapagos plus Garchomp plus Weavile plus Ogerpon Wellspring seems like a very solid top 4, and the bottom 4 are just complementary defensive pieces. I would be a bit worried about this team's fair resists only being Galar Weezing. That seemed like it can get exploited by good special attackers, but you know, I'm sure this team will be fine. Skullvillains just looks generic. It's nice to see Almolo go in round 3. And Terrakelio because Masquerade team didn't take it. And you also have like base Ogerpon for spikes. Toxtricity plus Espeon is an interesting ending. I kinda like the ideas there. But you look at that top, like Darkrai plus Lando T, we've been seeing a lot recently. And then Almolo just is the pivot. And then Keldeo Scizor are just 2 good Terra captains in general. Really interesting that they're now a pairing. And I think we'll complement each other quite well. Judgment Day, you'll notice a trend of Sun teams. There's quite a few of them in this DPL. So there's 2 of them in this draft. So Tusk Roaring Moon, I think, is the best start you can want. And I'm very surprised that Roaring Moon got black to this. So that makes it cool. You have Pecharunt there, just kind of as a complimentary thing. Klefki for the spikes, Mesprit because Healing Wish is fantastic, and you know, it's a cheap rocker and things. Electros for the flying resist, Walking Wake because Sun Abuser, and then Sunsetter and Torkoal because Ninetales was already gone. So I do like this team. Ninetales obviously would have been nicer, but I think of the Sun teams, this is probably the better one. Slay the Spiker, another team that looks very common. Zarude plus Cinderace is something we've seen quite a bit before, and I'm more warmed up to it compared to what I used to. Iron Crown with no Terra as the round 3 was not what I was expecting, but it makes sense. You know, you do need your Steel type, and Latias is there for Healing Wish because with Zarude you definitely want Healing Wish. That is a very late Gilmora, but it does give the hazard that you want as well as removal instead of Core Change. Terra Comfy is a great one that is definitely underexplored, and Mamoswine plus Salamence is an interesting ending. So I like the top, not so much a fan of the bottom. Then you get to Draft Dodgers, and I just don't get why you have a Sun element on this team. Apparently there is stories that Agency found out that they were looking at making a team into a Sun team, so they decided to snipe the Ninetales because of something that got said in the voice call. And it kind of makes sense. Terra Diancie is cool to see again though, because I think that thing is fantastic. We haven't seen it for a while. But I just don't get it after the bundle Slowking Galar, why would you then pivot the Sun? And Galarian Moltres without Terra is an interesting mod. It's no Mandibuzz though. Overall, there's definitely more to learn from these, but let's just say some people might have overcooked here. SB2 looks a bit more normal, shall we say. Judgment Day has a basic bitch-ass Masquerade Lando Keldeo team. Terra Koopa U is obviously cool, after we saw Void's use of it. And Void being on this team, it makes sense there was gonna be a Koopa U somewhere. Slay the Spiker, interesting. We start with Torty Dragonite. And Cinderace going way later in this pool. The ending looks very Yerdunky, because you see a Terra Brambleghast and a Terra Sandy Shocks, 2 mods that most people think are ass. But overall, I do like this team. An Urshifu Single Strike is an interesting try when people don't really draft fairies as much. Draft Dodgers looks a fairly standard Iron Valiant team. Valiant Treads, Terrai Drapple, Hisuian Samurott for spikes, and then you just kind of get some more pivots. Uxie Rotom for spin blocking, and then Revel Room's cool, and Typhlosion's another interesting one. So, cool team. Big dogs, I'm not really certain about. Like, I don't really get the Archaludon on this team, but Terrapagos, Pecharunt, Deoxys Speed, Gliscor. This does look like a Lax team, and that's exactly what it is. Also, shout out to Trapinch. That thing's going to be cool, and it's definitely going to get some really wacky KOs at some point in the season. I hope it's a first impression kill of Masquerade. I think that's what everyone hopes. But it's a Lax team, I'm not really going to judge it, because Lax wins with these things, so we'll get to that later. Triggervi will skip over, that was done by Kyle, it's a team. Huge power, really lacking speed, and it's another team that Sun was just kind of thrown onto that I don't get. Well, I get it a bit more, and it was definitely fortunate that Weavile got them in round 6, but the Sun ending definitely looks clunky. Even if I think Scream Tail is cool, is like an interesting mod in the current metagame, and Scovillain's a Scovillain. That thing's obviously going to get some hype, and probably will have a nice matchup or two. Not convinced on this team, especially with like a Teratoxipus. I'm not a fan of Teratoxipus, I've said this before. Nature's Guardians, it's fine. It's a Terrazaroot team with speed being bundled, which is not ideal, because it decided to focus on Garchomp and the Almolo for pivots. So, I think it could be one of those teams that lacks an offense in certain weeks. If, say, like, because Garchomp, yes, is obviously offense, and Zarude is a good win con most of the time, but anytime the Zarude might have to go into a breaker, I think it's going to be matchups where this team struggles. Because otherwise you're relying on like SD Garchomp for sweeps, and that just doesn't seem great. And finally, Skull Villains, I like this team. Terra and Malter Quackaball is a really interesting duo, and this looks a little bit inspired on that one Foddown Lake team that was used in DWL. Obviously that was Terra Blaziken, so it's a bit different, but Roaring Moon Lando T is a very solid wheel, and Tinkaton just kind of ties the team together nicely. Raw upon Wellspring makes sense because they had the points. Even if you don't necessarily need it, but Spikes I feel like was the main thing for that, as well as the water immunity. And then Ampharos is there because birds look kind of scary. So, some cool teams. Once again, like, there's going to be a lot of just common stuff across the board between Random Sun and then just Zarude teams that are just Zarude teams that are hard to judge on paper, and specialized squads. That's just the joys of DPL. SV3, we see more interesting stuff, as Huge Power decided to use the basic bitch Meowscarada Dragonite, and then decided not to get their ground type round 2. Did I just say Dragonite? I meant Terrakeldeo. They put a Dragonite on it, which I'm interested to see how that does, especially with the fact that ground type is Ursaluna Blood Moon. There's also a Slowking Galar on this team, which I don't know why you need it with the Tinkaton, but we'll see how that goes. Also, another Brambleghast. Why is this thing getting usage again? That's so interesting. Nature's Guardian looks like a basic bitch team. The only breaker really is Ogerpon Wellspring. It just looks like one of those Torrentee teams that can almost look too passive at times. But yes, I'm rich for talking because our SV1 looks quite similar. But I do think we've slightly better breaking power on that team. But it looks fairly similar to that. Skull Villains, it's a team. There's Terra Drapple and Terra Gengar, which should be cool. But it's another one of these Terrapcos, Garchomp, Weavile for speed, Scar for hazard, Terdrapple because it's a high Drapple. So, honestly, this team should be fine. It looks like a weird variation on some other Terrapcos teams that we've seen L5 use in the past, but we'll see how it goes. Also, Terrapcos going before Valiant. Super interesting here. The only time where it happened, but I'm sure it was debated because Valiant results have definitely fallen off. Speaking of Valiant, we have this Judgment Day team here with some really interesting Terras. Terra Moltres Galar is something I think we saw like early in the gen, but it'll be interesting to see how it does now. And Terra Slowking looks like a Who special, even though Who's not even in this event. That's really funny. Getting that top 3 is really good. And combining that with some low tier Terra captains that can do some work, the only thing that I think this team's missing is just a little bit more offensive pressure with some spikes. I think they would have gone a long way here. Also, Shadow's Rotom Frost, which in the snow could do pretty okay. Slay the Spiker. Now this is the team that's based off of the Foddown Lake TWL team. Except they just decided to sack off the Sableye, which was one of the most crucial parts about this team. Instead, there's a Terra Blissey, which I feel like has to be terrible, and Raw Iron Thorns is their Spiker. But overall, like, I get the idea. It just does mean that Latias is going to be a lot more pressured because there's not the Prankster Encore Mon or the Prankster Screens Mon. And, you know, Terra Blaziken looked fantastic in the DWL, which I might have already called DFL by accident, but, you know, we'll get to that later. And Terra Gyarados, I do think is very good. I was rallying for myself to no avail. But it does look like a team that's done well in the past, but I do think it's missing that crucial piece. Dodgers is fine. Another Terra Goldengo, which is cool. And Deoxys Speed being the speed option this time. And Terra Dragon, as we've seen in some other stuff, is absolutely fantastic. And can just be an absolute nuisance to a bunch of different drafts due to its like Terra typing flexibility and set flexibility, which makes it very potent. And the double spikers and Ogerpon plus Quillfish is pretty nice. Then Big Dogs just looks like a Zarude team, even down to Shadow's Monkey Dory for getting some DCL usage after it carrying K-Crick's sad ass. But it's not even Terra here, instead it's the Slitherwing, which I guess makes sense. Slitherwing's cool too. And one of the teams that bit the bullet on 3-point Carbink. But I'm still not convinced on Bundle being the speed on Zarude teams, but, you know, Zarude is an absolute demon, so it's going to get some wins, you would think. And then Trickavai, another Sun team, which I'm not going to comment on too much, because it's my own team, and I don't want to give too much away, because that's the joys of making content. Overall, there's some drafts of all time here, and, you know, there is some Terra Captains that should be pretty damn good, and some cool ones that I'm glad are seeing some usage. As before, not a lot changes. we see Draft Dodgers doing the basic Bitch Masquerade Terra Keldeo thing, but with a cool twist of putting on Terra Necrozma, a mon that I absolutely love, having seen Rage use it for seasonal, and just has a bunch of cool options. Big Dog, another one of these basic bitch cores we've seen a bunch of times. It's just that 7-mon split of Torrentee, Tinglu, Corviknight, Dragonite, Toxapex, Oderbron, Heartflame, and Rotom, which I believe is a similar core that Pardon the Eruption had. The key thing is that thing does Cyclizar. Instead, we see an Alcremie here, which is crazy in terms of the drop-off and shows how much those prices have been inflated. Triggervi we'll skip over, let's just say it's my least favourite team that we have, and I've already made mids plans for it. Huge Power! Why is there a round 2 Alomola on my screen? And it's Terra. I hate it here. Especially with the fact the bundle is here, and Terra Urshifu single could be cool. And Terra Sneasel. What? Oh, okay, interesting. But I do hate round 2 Alomola. I think that's just a horrible decision. You lose out on so much power, and I think that team is going to struggle for it. I think everyone has suffered from early Alomola syndrome before, and I think this is just another victim of it. The earliest it's been taken. Then, Darkrai, Garchomp, Jirachi. This is another one of these Fogbound late-ass looking teams. Once again with no Sableye, which I'll reserve my judgment on, but it does have some cool pieces, and Jirachi's probably going to be fairly pressured. That is certainly a Terra's team that looks very standard. That front 5 looks obnoxious. Super surprising Petron lasted that long. And then Terra Empoleon I think is very cool because of its set flexibility. Even if Terra Comfey might have been better? Hard to know. I think Comfey's sole job here is just to kind of keep the dragons in check that look a little bit annoying for this team. And Raw Hitmonchan. Wonder how that thing's going to do. Judgment Day, there's a Alola Ninetales. Remember the last time we saw that in SV? But Rory Moonland OT, once again, with Terra Goldengo, looks pretty potent. You get Cyclizar for removal. Another Raw Wellspring, which means we saw more Raw Wellsprings taken than Terra Wellsprings, which I think is a first. And Deoxys defense is an absolute piece of shit, and ties the team together quite nicely because of the spikes thing. So, I like that team. There's a bunch of interesting cooks, and we'll see how they get on. And here comes our obligatory son, except this is his own subset of obligatory son. This is what I like to call Panda Fuck It Son. This is very much Panda drafted and Panda coded, because he prefers Torkoal over Ninetales because he's a psychopath, and there's a Gouging Fire on it, as well as just a random ass Enamorous that makes no sense whatsoever. His team is so slow, if you don't have Sun, so I really am intrigued to see how Panda does with it. And it does have the elements that he did use with Panda Fuck It Sun in DCL, like with the Gouging Fire and the Terra Cresselia and things like that, but this team I think is a hell of a lot worse. But it's Panda, you kind of can't underestimate him at the best of times. Honestly, not a huge amount of trends when it came to SV. A lot of just boring round 1s and copying teams that have done well in the past. But there is still some new stuff that I'm excited to see how it works out, and some new stuff that I'm certainly questioning. Moving on to Swish, where it's safe to say there's kind of less consistency in Swish because of all the fluctuating price changes, so people do just kind of start doing some stuff, which makes it really interesting to look at. We see that Torrentee team with a Melmetal, a mon that's gotten a lot of traction following Toxic's success with it in the SS Swiss tournament thing. I don't actually know the proper name of it. The thing Addison ran. So, you see that with Nidoking Primarina, and some other interesting mons, like Latios, I feel like we haven't seen for a while, and Lycanroc Knight, which I think could be pretty damn good. I like this team from Skull Villains, and it does seem like something that could do quite well. Very not Theo, though. Judgment Day, this just looks like a Judgment Day team. I'm not 100% convinced on the speed, being fastest Lycanroc Dusk, but I think it's pretty much fine into most of the fast stuff because of the existence of Lando T, and Gourgeist just to support it. And Toxicroak, once again, as we've seen, kind of a cool mod at times, so I think that team will be fairly alright. Spiker looks fairly standard until you get to the ending, where you see a Brawldog and a Cursula. Cursula's a cool mod though, Perish Body's an interesting ability. So, we'll see how that one goes. Obviously, Swish Keldeo's been doing a lot better, and Tapu Lele I think is fantastic. So, I think that draft could do pretty well for itself. Draft Dodgers, you know, it's an iteration on the Coco Victini stuff with a Kyurem instead of Dragonite, and then you have it with Corviknight Nidoqueen as the backbone per se. And then there's a Sirfetch'd, which, you know, cool one-pointer. Nice to see this drop, and I feel like we haven't seen a Swiss Jellicent for quite some time. Then we get the big dogs. Weavile Lando I is a good start. and then Blastoise plus Jirachi plus Dragold. Overall, I think this team is very nice, and Mienshao rounds it out relatively nicely because it does need the fighting type and it needs a bit more pivoting. So I think that's what the ending was very much about. It's a very momentum-based team. Every single Mon outside of Weavile gets access to momentum, and I think the only thing this team's really missing from going over the edge is spikes, but that's not as necessary in a gen like Swish, where there's so much more removal. Trickify team, we'll skip over, because let's not talk about my own team. Huge power, Mew plus Cinderace, Aegislash. I really like that top 5. And then there's a Rotom Heat and Archeops, and I'm like, 2-point Weezing's cool though. But Rotom Heat, Archeops, surely you could have done, I get you need the bird, but like, why Rotom Heat? Huge power are definitely just going to make me question drafts, aren't they? But, you know, I think that's just kind of the way they draft. They're all a little bit, you know, off the wall at times, so it'll probably do a lot better in practice than it does on paper. And then Nature's Guardians looks like a fairly standard team, and Swish Cloyster is a cool thing to see. We haven't seen a Hippo in a while. But that front 5 looks very typical front 5, and looks like something that Craig would use. And, you know, Whimsicott is a Craig Mon because you get Prankster Encore. So, does very much look like a him sort of draft, and I'm sure he'll do pretty damn well with it. Swish is Swish, you know? You are going to kind of see some stuff get cooked with for the first time, and some relatively tried and true combinations with some iterations on them. And that's exactly what we see here. We start Switch 2 by noticing that Torrentee is still pick 1, and that's just remaining the case here with this Trickify team that I'm going to skip over. This huge power team is nice. I will really like that front 5. Moongus is an interesting try, but I think it's just the idea being that it is an eject button pivot a lot of the time. The 2 fairies though, that is the bit I don't get. Rabombi for webs, I guess, and it does need a faster speed tier. And then Clefairy, no, I don't get it. But, like I said, this is a common trend. Nature's Guardians. This, once again, looks like a great team, because there's a Grimmsnarl, and there's a Blaziken, and there's a regular Aerodactyl, and a Cradilly. You know, that front 4 looks very good. We know Craig loves Nihilego, so pretty standard stuff there. Skull Villains, another Coco Victini, this time with a Hydreigon, which I think is good. We see Broken Out Gloom, this time paired with a Ferrothorn, which is interesting. And another Blastoise with these teams, which is always good, because the Shell Smash sets also get Terrain Pulse. And you also see Coco Hawlucha, which is not a common one you see in Swish. And Mamoswine is cool. So I like this team. I think this team will do well. Judgment Day, this just looks like an Addison team. I feel like we've seen this 7 from Addison before, of Kart, Cinder, Kyurem, Swampert, Togekiss, Jirachi, Persian. Well, maybe that's 6, I'm not so sure with Persian. And Emolga just kind of rounds it out and makes the, like, Torn matchup on paper look less shit, even though you're never going to bring it. But it's there. I guess you have to respect it, but that just looks like an Addy draft, and I'm sure it'll do well. Slay the Spikers! This is an interesting draft, because Mew plus Zapdos makes a lot of sense. Aegislash is great, and Nidoqueen just to kind of give you the extra hazard and granted poison things. Azumarill is cool, because there is a lot of mons that there's a lot of team structures now that don't really deal with Azumarill that well. And then Latias, which I'm assuming is just here to be a healing wish bot, but it does look like a weird fit. And then, when you think the team wants more speed, you round it out with an Incineroar and a Hitmonchan. Hitmonchan is the most II-pilled mon of all time, and it's not even us that drafted it. So, not sure on this team. I think maybe a little bit more speed would have been nice, but hey-ho. Draft Dodgers, once again, we've on Melmetal, Uxie for the Trick Room. That's a really late Dragonite and a late Primarina, which makes this team look a lot better. And this looks the exact same as the Weavile team that we saw in Swish 1, which, just to remind you, this Draft Dodgers team, they're pretty much identical. It is hilarious how similar they are. Shout out Surfedge for getting usage, I guess. And then lastly, big dogs, we see Zerorlando I. Soaking G Corv as a bulky core, which is interesting. Terrakion, which is cool to see getting some use. Zarude, another one we don't really see a lot of use of, outside of Sebi. The Volcanion Drampa as like the low tiers. Honestly, cool team. Some interesting breakers, and there's a lot of ways to just kind of get them in, which I like. So, I think this is definitely a bit more experimental compared to Swish 1. There's a lot more stuff that you're kind of questioning, and there is some tried and true stuff here. You see an Addy-Pill team and a Crate Pill team, but that's Swish. You are going to see a bunch of teams where they're suited to the person. I think the Skullvillains team here is my favorite, but I'm sure they'll all be fairly okay. Then we get to Swish 3, which starts with Double Genie. And some interesting mons here on this Spikers squad. The ending very much looks like we're going for screens offense. And then, you know, you just kind of see the Jirachi and the Pangoro, which is cool. So I'm interested to see how that team does. It's one of the most aggressive Torn T teams I think we've seen for quite some time, probably since Hunter's reign. So I'm pretty intrigued to see how this one does. Then we get to Draft Dodgers, and this is a cool team. 10 points Crafty rounds it out quite nicely, and Stack Attack is cool. I feel like we haven't seen that thing get usage since that winning Wings of Wrath team. So I think all the pieces fit quite nicely. I'm not super certain about the pecs, but I imagine it's just going to be an eject button bot to be able to get in like 80 Laddie, Raikou Lando, whatever's kind of necessary. So, cool team. Big dogs. We once again see Coco Kyurem, which is a combination that I think is very good. And it's rounded out in a bit of a strange way. Obviously, Corviknight's there is the pivot. Lycanroc does go for the speed tier. Then Nidoqueen, Volcanion, Alolan Persian, Gourgeist. I get the reason for all the mons being here in general, I'm just not sure they're the most cohesive together. But I can definitely be proven wrong on these things, but that's just kind of my 2 cents. Trick will skip over, just shout out Cloyster. Huge power. Now this is actually identical to that the Big Dogs team, just with the Uxie being later. It's hilarious how they just ended up the exact same way. But that, I guess, can happen, even though I think this is an actual first that they're the exact same. And I really hope we get to see the mirror. That would be just cinema. Then another Kart Zapdos team with a Lele. Aerodactyl for speed again. You can tell this is a J-Scurf decision. And that's just cool. So another interesting Nature's Guardians team, but once again you can kind of just see who's going to be piloting this tier. Skull Villains, we see Mew, Sally, Tapu Fini, Nihilego. Like, this is also an interesting collection of mons. We see another Swish Ferrothorn out of Skull Villains. And Zygarde 50 I do think is very underappreciated in Swish right now. So I like the fact they've gone for it. But in general, I'm not sure about everything together as a fit. Ferrothorn does just kind of seem a little bit unnecessary, and I think you could have gone a slightly different direction. Even with the double darks at the end. I get why Spiritom's there and why Sneasel's there, but it's like, could you have done better? I don't know. Then, Judgment Day. Cinderace with Zero Aura is a wheel that I feel like we've not seen before, and is one that I'm interested to see how it does. Then, Hydreigon Nidoking is very nice for pairing for it, and it's like, all the wheels in general look quite nice, until you get the Piloswine Frostlass, which, that's interesting. Like, the Piloswine I'm assuming is here for very specific reasons, mostly to do with priority. But, like, the Frostlass I really like on this team. The Piloswine I'm less convinced on. But, you know, Addy knows a hell of a lot more about this tier than I do. So does DDG. So, I don't doubt their judgment. And, yeah, overall these Swish teams, I think for the most part people did draft and Swish quite well. There's very few teams that I'm looking at and I'm just severely questioning. And if it's just minor things like speed, which you can probably account for a lot better in this gen compared to other ones. So, I think Swish will be as competitive as ever. All the jokes about the Swish Gauntlet and all those things. And I think based on these drafts, that's certainly going to ring true. The key change to note for Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon was the introduction of a Z budget, which meant that every team could only spend 30 full points on Z captains, which for the first time got expanded up to 3. So, you'll notice that the power level doesn't look as strong as it used to. This first team, for example, you look at Coco Cortana, but the card's not even Z. And, you know, it's one of these typical Mega Pidgeot style teams. The Silvali's an interesting touch, and Primeape's cool because it can run a bunch of different sets. And, like, Xenocrozma is great. So, I do like that team. It has everything you need. Skull Villains, Zero Aura, really weird to not see Z Garchomp, but it's necessary. And, you know, in memory of Aster, they have decided to draft a Mega Gyarados. So, another team that I think is quite nice, Clefable here, probably going to do the typical iPro, like, Healing Wish bot type thing. But that's really potent into Zero Aura, Garchomp, and Mega Gyara. 3 absolutely crazy threats on paper, so it makes a ton of sense. Judgment Day is the earliest Mega Sceptile I've ever seen, and unfortunately it was a Snipe. But this is a team that we have kind of seen before do some work, and Z Scolipede I think is an interesting addition onto this team. Also, another Piloswine on Judgment Day. But that front 4 and then Mega Sceptile to round out the speed does seem like something we've seen before, and has done pretty well. Slay the Spiker, Torn Kyurem Black is a legal Z pairing, so that's a really strong start, especially with Mega Sableye. It's another iteration of, I think it was a Zero Fox Given team that we saw in DCL that did really well with this sort of idea. So, I do think that the ending, like the fat bits of Slowbro, Registeel, Hitmontop might be a bit too passive, but that front 4 I think is going to be doing a lot of carrying along with Sableye. And you don't have to bring one of them every week, which doesn't seem anywhere near as bad. Draft Dodgers is another cool team. That's a really late Mega Lop that I think is quite cool. and Z on mons like Deoxys, Defense, and Mimikyu is cool. And overall, like, the top 4 has really good synergy, and then a lot for the speed, Deoxys for spikes pressure, and Mimikyu just kind of is the panic button for when your offense isn't quite doing it. So I think this is a nice team. Also, shoutouts to Litigant, dealt with Darkrai one time. Big dogs, this is just a classic Mega Lake Greninja team, and the Zygarde 50 at the end does kind of round it out quite nicely. Also, 2-point Delmines was a very popular mod, but you know, you do kind of cover a lot of your bases here. You get your spikes pressure, you have your pivot in Uxie, Salazzle's quite nice for the speed tiers, so yeah, I like this team. Skip over Trick of Eye and our Mega Sceptile Snipes, sorry the John, and finally we get to Huge Power, and I like this team. Yes, it's still fairly unusual, but the idea of Mega Mawile plus Cresselia I think is very nice, because obviously it gives you the Trick Room, it gives you the Lunar Dance, but you do also have other offensive tools, such as your Latias Crobat Crook, that are quite good. Lantern covers a lot of the stuff that you could be weak to, the main one that comes to mind being Tapu Koko, and then Serena, well, yes, sometimes doesn't look great. Choice Scarf sets could be quite good, especially when your team doesn't look like it super appreciates Pokemon. I'm interested to see how this team does for Huge Power. And yeah, not a lot to say. People have adapted well, and it is cool to see some new Z captains, such as, you know, Z Spiritomb, Z Scolipede, Z Regirock. And last time you ever heard the word Z Regirock be said. So Usum's going to be quite different, and I know people were complaining about it, and I get it, but I think it's worth an experimentation, or at least for one season. Then, once again, we see Tapu Koko here in Usum 2, except we see it with a Alolan Raichu, which I feel like we haven't seen in years. A Mega Mawile is an interesting try on a Koko team, because obviously you get Terrain Boost Thunder Punch. A Draco Nidoqueen, another Slowbro, Z Terrakion's cool. Once again, another mon we haven't seen a lot in Usum for quite some time. So this is a lot of mons that are kind of put together that are really interesting. And I like the regen core, I like the pivots, I like Nidoqueen there as kind of the main sponge hazards and deals with the electrics. And then obviously you have the electric terrain boys, which are quite scary. So, cool team. Skip over us, we got a Huge Power, which this just looks like one of those typical momentum plus breaker stuff. Except along with Mega Medicham, you also have a Hoopa Unbound, which, safe to say, this thing is very scary. Also, you can tell it's Huge Power and Wombo because there's a Ribombee here, and the last time we really saw Ribombee pop up was Wombo in DPL many, many years ago now. So, really interesting team with like the breakers. Like, you just kind of start off with 2 of the best pivots in the format, you then have Superior, which is a really scary mon that can just snowball, and then Medi and Hoopa, which is just going to break basically every wall in the game. So, cool team. Nature's Guardians, Celesteela, Mega Glade, Tapu Fini is a cool start. The big thing here, though, is that it is Z Thunder T, which I think is very cool. You then have that with Z Parting Shot Mon in Persian, which I think is going to be quite nice for Sally, Glade, and Fini. Just covers the team quite well. Quilladin, just to help with the electrics that could be annoying. Donphan for removal, and Nihilego because it's a good Scarfer. Yeah, this team makes sense. Another Nihilego in a different gen, so Craig might have had some influence. Skullvillains, this is Theo returning to form in terms of going back to Usum, which we haven't seen for a long time. And it's very clear from Torn, Scizor, Clef, Mega Sableye, and rounded out with Z Dugtrio, which is something that he always drafted in Usum. So, cool team. Z Milotic's also cool because you get like Z Haze and things like that, even if you don't really like necessarily need it. And I do want to see a game where he just does bring Water Z and just break the shit out of something. I will say though, weird to see him using Usum Stall without his darling Audino. That's interesting. Another one of these Mew and Fernet teams then, from Judgment Day, with Mega Dino, which is interesting. I don't think this would have happened if they didn't get the round 4 Weavile. And yes, the bulk at the end I'm definitely questioning. Like, Suicune is not the same potent threat as it used to be back in the day. And Mega Dino, while yes, can help out because like Wish and Healing Wish into some of the offense or even just some of the bulk, I'm not sure about this team. But Bobber's the GOAT, so I'm sure he'll figure it out. Spiker, we see yet another one of these Kieran B teams here with a late Mega Lop, which looks quite nice. Z Vileplume instead of Z Spiritomb, I'm not sure about, but I think having the Flinch Boys of Jirachi and Togekiss as well as Starmie for removal, I think is quite interesting. There's a lot of like bits about this team. It looks like a Zinc team, I'll say that much. And there definitely is some interesting bits, I'm just not sure how they come together. And finally, Draft Dodgers is fairly standard. I think that top 5 looks pretty damn normal. Great Garchomp, Necrozma, Scar, and Toxapex. Stunfisk because you need that kind of secondary ground that helps with the Coco and Zero matchup. Lilligant because Lilligant's probably the best cheap grass you can get. Mega Gardevoir is a cool try because the steals just seem to be less and less capable of taking Hyper Voice that get drafted. Like, look at this draft in general. There's not many steel types here on this board that you're like, yeah, they're comfortable taking Hyper Voices. So, I think Mega Gardevoir is a cool try. It's one of those mons you see sometimes, but not consistently. So, cool teams across the board here. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, probably one of the cooler drafts. Lucian 3 brings about some more interesting tries, such as Judgment Day going for Mega Camerupt, which, with a Uxie, it makes sense, because at least you do get, like, Trick Room and things like that. And Z-Mence is a cool mon that we have seen in the past, even without the Z budget. So, I do like this team. There is a bunch of stuff. Superior is obviously fantastic on this, because you do get, like, Nature Power from the Electric Terrain to deal with, like, Celesteals and things like that. And just a bunch of cool mons in general. Swampert makes sense with Mega Camel. Slay the Spiker, we see Mega Diancie, which we didn't see a lot. And this is a Sand team with Ninetales at the end, which I know looks funky, but this thing does not get Drought yet, so it's fine. So you do look at... wait, no, it does get Drought this gen. Why is the Ninetales here? It's interesting. But I do like that top 3, and then Pex Hippo for the backbone as well as Tangrowth. Oh, it's for Sunsweeper Tangrowth. I forgot Zing enjoys this. So, yeah, no, interesting double weather team. I'm excited to see how that does. Then, Ladder Team Fernet Flundiai looks fairly standard, and Mega Sharpedo is cool on this sort of team. Even if it does prefer the top speed electrics in Coco and Zera, I think it can work just fine off this sort of structure. And then, as well, with your hazard support, which you need with Mega Shark, you have the Klefki there. Then Valpo Milamise is just kind of a bit of a backbone, pranks are Encore to deal with anything. Looks pretty good. Big Dogs, it's another one of these Mega Sceptile teams that look fairly standard. Selly, Run and Wash, Lando Eyes, Necrozma is a very good top 4. Stunfisk, as we've seen with a lot of these Landos and Garchomp teams, he's just there as the secondary guy. Sceptile for speed, and Heligo because good Scarfer, and once again, another Spiritomb. It's definitely a one that's picking up traction at that sort of price, which it makes sense given Mega Medi and Mega Delayed. Then, Trigavai will skip over. It is an eye cook of all time. Huge power. Once again, we see a late Zygarde 50 that rounds out the team quite nicely. I think the one thing this team might be uncertain about is in terms of its Z cabins. Because Zygarde Fun DT Alolan Persian definitely looks interesting, but I feel like there's going to be a lot of times you want to see Parting Shot. Even though you might be reliant on Healing Wish on other occasions, but it does free up your Mesprit quite a lot. So, I do like the bits of this team, but I do think there's kind of going to be a case of wanting multiple things from that Z Crystal that you're not going to be able to get. Nature's Guardians, then, is really slow. You see the Azelf here, which is like kind of necessary for speed. With Z, I think is very good. Also, shout out to Z Cofagrigus, which, as we know, I think is fantastic because it can just do a bunch of really cool things in matchups because the Dark types just don't like taking Shadow Balls for the most part. It's that Stop Pit that I think is quite interesting, and the lack of Healing Wish is going to suck. Well, outside of Z Memento Kofag. And shout out to Bouffalon getting usage again. I do think this thing is very good in both Lucian and Swish, so cool to see it. Then we get the Skull Villains, which is a Mega Beedrill draft, one that I feel like we haven't seen for a while. But with Kieran B, Greninja, Mew, which is a really strong top 3, and then Skarm for more removal, as well as Donphan, I think that top 7's really nice. Less said about the Heatless the better, but I'm sure it might have the odd good matchup here and there, but it is a Heatless at the end of the day. Some really cool teams here in Lucian 3, where like you do have some iterations on some common ideas, and then you have some really cool cooks, like the Dual Weather, or you have Mega Camel, you have our Rain team, whatever that's meant to do. And yeah, I just think there's really cool to see a bunch of Megas getting some usage for the first time in a while, or for the first time really ever. I think people did a good job on that in Lucian this year, so I'm excited to kind of see how the tier evolves with these sorts of decisions, and hopefully a lot of them just aren't regretted and dropped for more tried and tested and arguably boring stuff at mid-season. And finally, we get to Aurus, which, starting with Aurus 1, this huge power team looks fairly standard when you look at the first 5. Uxie plus Mega Guard is a fairly common thing. Superior's pretty normal on these teams, especially due to the way the kind of Rushmore deal with these things. Then you look at the ending, and you see a Selgor, which is a one I enjoy, and a one we haven't seen for a while. Magnezone, speaking of stuff we haven't seen for a while, but is cool with Mega Guard. And a regular Slowkick, making a triple Psychic on this draft. This is definitely interesting, and I'm sure Zaz will make it work. Nature's Guardian, this looks like a fairly standard Horus team, especially if you look at Flinch Brothers. Another Flinch Brothers plus Starmie, in a different gen, which is cool. Mega Septox, this team desperately needed speed, and Lambda T plus Infernape is just pretty common and good. Skull Villains, that top 5, once again, fairly standard. Bisharp is cool because obviously you do get strong knockoff and pretty good pursuit at times. Fairly interesting Scarfer. And SD sets can clean up quite a bit. Rosalia, what's a Rosalia? It does good things. It helps this team tremendously with the Keldeo matchup. And then Matang is an attempt to deal with Mega Guard. Not great, but it can technically do it. So I do like this team. Ticks a lot of the boxes, and it should be cool to see how it falls. Judgment Day, we see Mew, Mega Lop, Scizor, and Wash, Nidoking, which is a pretty insane front 5. And then we see a Tyrantrum, which, as we saw from Dino Crisis last season, Horus Tyrantrum, pretty good. Aromatisse is certainly interesting, and Sneasel makes sense for the speed tiers as well as being able to shoot traps from the fat psychics that Lop won't like. But overall, good team. Slay the Spiker, Mega Heracross is very cool. Horus Victini we haven't seen a ton of lately, and Horus Florus we just don't see at all. But that front 5, like Lando I plus Weavile is strong, Metagross rounds it out nicely, Tentacruel because you need it for Rapid Spin and ground Poison, and Eel because flying resists are kind of bad at times, and Eel just rounds that out nicely. So, good team. Interested to see how Victini does these days. Draft Dodgers, I'm glad to see Mega Absol getting some usage. I saw Chip use it during RCL to really good effect, so I'm cool to see it getting some use here in DPL. But I'm not sure about it on this team. The first 4 is very good. Torrentee, Keldeo, Latios as offense, and then Klefki's and Enabler is really nice. Nidoqueen then, just your grounded poison, your check to electrics, your ground type, hazards, you can still break with it. Slowbro, I'm not sure is correct. I get what the idea is in terms of you just a bulky pivot guy that you can just kind of get in and out a bunch, but I'm not sure Slowbro is the correct pick here. And Ampharos makes sense because once again you do want that extra little bit for the electric types that look quite scary into you. Cool team, but I think maybe could have been a bit better. Big Dogs, this looks fairly normal. And you'll see the problem here with 8-point Gramble, and all of the reasons that I hate the current Horus board is pretty much summarized by that mon, especially with the fact it's getting drafting. But this very much looks like a draft 15 team, especially because Mega Medi, Gren, Fundy-Eye, very good offense, Donphan, Registeel, and Quillfish, and then Gorgeist just there as your spin blocker, and Gramble because this team needs a fat fairy for a bunch of different reasons. A big one being its lack of good dark resist. So the Gramble makes sense, it's just Hallrich going for it. And then Trickify, I like parts of this team, and then other parts I'm not so sure of. So overall, good Horus drafts, and a bunch of returning to form after some interesting attempts of cooking that have been seen recently. Speaking of interesting cooking attempts, Horus 2, there's definitely a lot more of that. Starting out, the Draft Dodgers, yes, the front 3 looks pretty normal. Then you see a very early Bronzong and a Terrakion and an Aerodactyl, which, you get the reason for them being there. Aerodactyl because this team is slow as fuck, and Terrakion because Physical Breaker, but sure you could have gone a better steal than Bronzong, bro. Surely there was a better fit, but hey-ho. Then we get to Big Dogs, and once again, this looks like a draft 15 team. There's another Gorgeist. Honchkrow is a cool mon. It's going to tank because the team definitely needed removal. But Landers and Latios is really good offense. Manaphy is a mon that I think is fantastic, even if 15 is probably too expensive for it these days. And Mega Manetric, as we know, on the right team, especially these sorts of Landa T teams, just does really well for itself. And Klefki is a good enabler because it gives you spikes, it gives you screens, and all the prankster stuff that this team might need. We'll skip over ourselves. Zardwise cool, and the Zangoose would have been nice if it was a Trevenant, if we paid attention. But less said about that, the better. Huge power, speaking of Trevenant. This is a good team, except the Sandcore, I think, maybe went a bit too far. Yeah, maybe it did. But Trevenant plus Gloom is the bit that I'm like, interesting. But the Sandcore, I think, could be a very interesting cook, and is something that Zazo has definitely looked at before. And that front 3, I think, is very difficult to feel like you end up with a bad draft. So I'm really intrigued to see how the Sandcore goes. And even if it doesn't work out, it's definitely an easy way to pivot from, because of how good that start is, and because you've Mons Trevenant at the end to just kind of round out some loose ends that you don't have to account for later. Nature's Guardians, another Mew Infernape with Crobat for speed. with a Mega Abomasnow, which does look a bit J-Scurfy, even though I know he's not going to play Horus. Also, another Florges, so his price seems to be doing pretty okay for it. We see another Lando Eye Weavile team with Jirachi, this time with Mega Altaria, which, in my opinion, is a fantastic mon. I'm glad to see it getting some use. And, you also see that Jolteon, a mon you don't see a lot in DPL. And overall, I do really like this team. You get your spin, you get your offense with Lando Weavile, Mega Alt can just be a jack of all trades, you have your fast electric, it's 2016, your Granite Poison that can also set spikes, which could be quite good for those top 5, and Mistbag as a mon can just do a hell of a lot of good things. Then we get the Judgment Day and another Mega Heracross. This time with a Grand Thunder Eye beginning, which I think was we've seen it a fair bit, and we're going to keep seeing it. Don't find going this early, makes sense because you need the Rapid Spin, you need the Ground type. Togekiss fits this team fairly well, even if it is double flying type, but I think the role it provides is very nice. Quillfish for Spikes, which is good, and Registeel is a mon that we're kind of starting to see get use again, which is cool. I do enjoy me some more Registeel, I've always said that. And Kyurem is a nice attempt on this team to just give the breaker, especially since the stuff it struggles with, for the most part being the Steel types, is something Mega Heracross eats for breakfast. Although, I will say, I'm not sure how this team really does at getting through Fairy types. Not in terms of checking them, but more so breaking them. And then finally, Slay the Spiker. Honestly, just a good Mega Gallade Zapdos team. Scizor Clefable's a really nice wheel. And then, Go-Go's cool, and that's probably the latest Nidoking I've seen for a long time. And it rounds the team out very nicely. So, overall, cool drafts. And definitely some cooking attempts here, especially that Mega Abomasnow. And whatever this Zazo Soundcore is, but, it's Zazo. I can't underestimate that man. Our 16th and final draft here doesn't really cook up too many surprises. Skullvillain's team is your standard Mega Gardevoir team. Crobat plus Nidoking is not the most common thing in the world. And we see another Alomola after its success in Horus as part of drafting of the Influence last DPL. Maybe we'll see another Calm Mindset. Who knows? This Judgment Day team is very cool. We see Double Genie plus Starmie for removal, which is nice. Azu is your physical breaker. And Mega Venu is a mon that we don't see a lot, but man, it's a bitch to kill, has a bunch of set flexibility, and fits this team quite nicely. Slay the Spiker is a cool team. We once again see Cope Aerodactyl for speed, which I'm not convinced on, and Dragald plus Kyurem is something that I think is quite interesting. So it doesn't quite have the same fairy problem as mentioned with that Judgment Day team. So, honestly, interesting ideas. Round 3 Mega Lop makes this team look quite good, especially with one of the best Pursuit Trappers in the tier in Crook. So, it's just that bottom 4 that I'm not entirely sure is correct, per se. But this is something that Zing does a lot, that he'll just kind of stack things on for the sake of pressure. And the pressure thing here definitely seems to be Steel types. Draft Dodgers, we see the Garchomp Zapdos, Mega Blastoise for good spin, Klefki for support, another Terrakion for breaking. And then Mesprit because Healing Wishbot, Sneasel because it fits the speed tiers nicely, and Gloom because it's a Gloom and it does good Gloom things. Not a lot to really say about that team, it's just good. And Horus Terrakion, it's interesting that now is the time that it's getting use again. You get the big dogs, and this team does look old school once again, as we see Mega Diancie plus Torn plus Hydreigon Metagross, which pair quite nicely, Blastoise for removal, Roselia because it helps with things like the Keldeo matchup, Granbull, once again, because the team needs it due to Mega Diancie not being the best fairy for it, and fighting resists on this team are certainly lacking in terms of dealing with the scary physical ones. And then Stunfisk rounds it out because you do want that additional flying resist and check to the electrics since you don't have a ground type. Cool team from Drab, and it's round 15, he is the GOAT, and he's definitely going to do well this season. We'll skip over the Trickavai team. It is a cool Wyatt Cook, and I really hope Mega T-Tar pops the fuck off. Also, that note you can see is for Dookie, the Kofag, which has history and hopefully keeps doing well. Huge Power team, there's a Mega Ampharos on my screen, which I don't really know what to think, but, could be cool. And fits the team kind of nicely because you do have the fat bits of Crest plus Togekiss plus Prankster's Sableye at the end. And the top 4 is pretty decent, but the ending definitely looks a little bit to be desired. But hopefully Fabio can do some work. God, I haven't said Fabio in years. You can tell Mega Ampharos does not get drafted that often. And finally, we see a round 7 mega delayed team here in Nature's Guardians, which I think is made up for by the fact that they took round 1 Clef, which is really unusual these days, especially at its price point of 18. And you see that with Tentacle Bronze on the next wheel, Raikou for the speed, and Quilladin's obviously. Quilladin plus Gligar's dual Eviolite Bros is certainly interesting. I do like the team, it definitely looks in the wrong order, and I think if Gallade went first it would have been fine, but still pretty decent team. Not super certain about it, in terms of like, it wouldn't be exactly how I'd approach it, but damn, pretty good. And Oris 3, I think definitely looks the most like return to form with cooks that you think makes sense, even if there is some endings that you're like, what are these guys doing? But that's DPL for you. That's Team Tours in general. Sometimes you are just going to see drafts that you're like, huh, what is the attempt there? And either gets blown up at mids, or it completely takes you by surprise. And let's just say I fully expect one of these to do that. And just like that, we've discussed through 16 drafts, and this video is far longer than I wanted it to be, but that happens a lot when it gets to me recounting through things. So, I hope you guys enjoyed that kind of little ramble through all these 16 drafts, and are looking forward to more DPL content from me this season. In terms of what that DPL content is going to be, it's going to be a bit shorter, which I'm sure you'll be happy about. I'm going to be looking at games of the week. So what I'm going to be doing is, in the DPL server every Monday, I'm going to stick a poll up in terms of what you guys think is the game of the week, or the people in the server. And then, whatever wins, I will do a deep dive on that matchup, as well as what happens in the game itself. And honestly, should be a good time. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that, as well as maybe some other stuff that I'll do on the side, but that'll probably be what I do for the most part. But it's me, I always change my mind spontaneously, so maybe there is more things. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please do all the good old YouTube stuff, and let me know your hype level going into this DPL season. Hope you all enjoyed. I'll catch us next week for the week 1 game of the week. Peace!